Well, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast that is a proud partner of the Eurostep Podcast Network and the Blue Wire family. As always, I am your host, Numac, coming to you with the official start of draft season on Talk of the Tundra. We're going to do a little bit of Jordan and I's perception on how the Packers should approach their draft this year as it's being held in Green Bay. As
What?
I know that exclamatory "what" was from my lovely co-host Jordan. Jordan, how you doing, buddy?
Hello.
And then Jordan, I also gonna recap the couple of moves from free agency that they've done since the opening week, and it's not a whole lot. So uh,
No.
let's just start there. So the only signing outside of Nate Hobbs and Aaron Banks that they've had uh, since those deals were announced, Packers signed former Chiefs wide receiver McCole Hardman to a 1 year deal for the league minimum, which is 1.17 million, and a $150,000 signing bonus, and his salary will become guaranteed by week one. So a non-guaranteed contract, I think, besides the signing bonus, um, until he makes the roster, essentially. So if he flames out in camp, no harm, no foul, besides taking a couple of snaps away from guys on the roster otherwise. So I guess initial reaction from you, Jordan. Not initial. This is 2 weeks old by now, but a reaction from you about the Packers going out and getting McCole Hardman as apparently their wide receiver one, which is obviously a joke, but the only wide receiver move they made in free agency thus far.
I didn't hate it, honestly. McCole Hardman's someone that I think the idea of it is very pleasing to me. I feel like the execution of McCole Hardman is wavered over the years. Probably, and honestly, if I'm being honest, it's declined since kind of being tabbed as like the next breakout receiver, especially when the Chiefs made the move to trade Tyreek Hill and send him to Miami. I feel like they had a lot of internal optimism of the options that they were going to turn to, of speedy, field stretching wide receivers that could, you know, be a weapon for Patrick Mahomes. And Harmon's it's never really popped. I mean, he even left Kansas City and then quickly went back to Kansas City for the first of their uh, back-to-back Super Bowls before this year. So yeah, I like the idea of it, and it's the contract details just came in today or yesterday, based on I think that's what it was, Spotrac. Um, and it's just a nice flyer. Like it's not gonna certainly change our optimism or pessimism or even keeledness about the Packers offseason, but I think considering Christian Watson is going to be out for a good portion of the year, you need someone that replicates his skill set, and McCole Hardman provides that. And I think more importantly, just get someone off of kick returns that isn't Jaden Reed. Like,
Yeah, that's
just
a,
he
a, a
never
good part.
really felt comfortable there.
No, pretty obviously, I would say. Um, the weird thing like about McCole, I shouldn't say weird thing about McCole Hardman, but like the thing about McCole Hardman is like he's not really been a deep target the last few years. Looking at his PFF stats, the last 2 years he had no targets over 20 yards for 20 yards down the field. Uh, his rookie contract years, so through 2022 ish, because he was a rookie in 2019. Um, he was a deeper target, but he hasn't really played a whole lot, as well as done a whole lot
I think
with like the last couple of years.
I think that's I don't know if that's necessarily a reflection on him. I think that's a reflection on just how kind of I don't know what you'd call the Chiefs offense, but not explosive.
Sure,
Sterling is part of
not
that.
yeah, yeah. The I suppose that's right. The past 2 years, the Chiefs' offense hasn't looked great for sure.
They're more very, what is, I don't know what you, not dink and dunk, but very precise
Hmm.
and not like, I'm not going to say anything eloquent, so
Yeah,
I'm just going to leave it at that.
he also just like hasn't played a whole lot. Like I said, the past 3 years. In his first 3 years in Kansas City, he played 16, 16, and 17 games in the regular season. And had 538, 560, and almost 700 yards, 6, 4, 2 touchdowns in those 3 years. Um, Not a whole lot on the ground either. He only had, I'm trying to do the quick math here, less than 100 yards in Kansas City his first 3 years. Like 46 plus 31 plus 17, so pretty close to 100 total. So I'm not really sure what he's gonna be like. Like he really popped his rookie year. He was a Pro Bowler and second team All Pro, but just hasn't really lived up to it since then. He's like I said, since 2021, so the 2022, 23, and 24 seasons, he played 8, 11, and 12 games for a total of 40, 42, sorry, 52 catches. Like that's just not a lot. And so at the worst case scenario, it's just a flyer on a guy. You know, a guy that can maybe eject some life into a room that needs a little competition, I think. I think there was some competition last year in camp, but it was kind of like who's going to be the one thing. Like there wasn't competition for spots, if that makes sense. And so
Yes.
like maybe McCole Hardman pushes the bot. Like maybe the presence of McCole Hardman raises the floor of the receivers. Like it makes Dontavian Wicks a little better because he knows he has to start catching balls, or maybe McCole Hardman goes in that spot because he's a slot receiver. Same thing with Jaden Reed. Like we thought going into last year that these guys kind of had their spots locked down, and I think now with the troubles they both had last year, that they could play their way out of their roles if their play the second half of last year continues into 2025. And so I'm not saying McCole Hardman is likely to do that because again, it's he hasn't really been productive the last few years, but that's the bet, right? Is that you
Yeah.
sign McCole Hardman for less for league minimum, and he pops for some reason. Like that's the best case scenario for the team. And worst case is you cut bait and don't lose any money. So
I'm gonna say right now, I think he's making a team.
I mean, let's look at the depth chart quick. We like off the top of the head, it's Romeo Dobbs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian
Wicks,
Wicks, Bull Melton, Malik
Heath,
Heath, and then like
and the rest are like
the rest,
futures guys.
right? And so, I mean,
That's pre-draft,
right,
obviously.
that's pre-draft, and we'll talk about that in a second. Also, Jesus Christ, open up Packers page, and there's a story about an ex NFL running back being charged in a dogfighting case. That's not fun.
Yeah.
Uh so I'm just double checking to make sure we forget anyone significant for the receivers, and no, like it's Tulu Griffin, Julian Hicks, and Cornelius Johnson are the three guys that we didn't mention that are wide receivers on the roster right now. And so, uh I mean, your prediction is he makes the team. I wouldn't be so sure. Like, I
I
I think
sorry,
Malik.
sorry.
Nope, you're good. I think Malik Heath and Bull Melton are good, and they've shown some upswings. Like Malik Heath had like pops a little bit throughout the last 2 seasons. Not really targeted a whole bunch. He had that drop against the Eagles, which was detrimental, but that happens. Like he was pretty sure-handed otherwise, if I'm not mistaken. And Bull Melton is younger and does what McCole Hardman does better, I think. And so I think like if he's going to take somebody's spot, I think it's Bull Melton's. But I'd imagine they're going to invest in wide receiver in the draft too, and that just pushes all those guys down more. Like I think as like if we're excluding Christian Watson from the final roster tab because he'll be on IR, it's going to be Reed, Dobbs, Wicks as the top three, I'd imagine, and then depending on how many rookies they draft and where they draft them, like if they take a wide receiver in the first round, LOL, or if they take two in the first 5 rounds, I'd imagine they'd both make the team, kind of thing. And then I think I'd keep Heath over Bull Melton and McCole Hardman, but that's just kind of where I'm sitting
It's
right now, 4 months after football has last been played.
yeah, I mean it's just gonna be a camp thing. Like
Right,
we know what Bo Melton and Heath can do,
right.
and they've had their moments, but you know, I think pre-draft knowing that the Packers will probably take a shot on a wide receiver at some point in the draft. I just think they know that they will be missing Christian Watson. And even though Bo Melton, has some gadgetry in his bag, it's not like they put him out there to be kind of the field stretching threat. That was more of a role strictly for Dontavian Wicks more than anybody else. So I think just getting another person that can kind of be more of that field tilting wide receiver, if that is the kind of role that they envision him playing, which I would assume. But I just think it's more of like competition. And if I'm even in this kind of knowing that he is not the same player as he once was coming out of the or coming into the league and playing for the best offensive system and for the best quarterback in the league,
Hmm.
like you're it's the high bar to kind of constantly keep attaining. And really, the Chiefs have had a really big struggle developing any wide receiver that hasn't gotten into legal trouble or injury troubles
Yeah,
considerably.
yeah, they've had
So,
tough luck. I mean, Xavier
so
Worthy
I
has worked out so far, and well,
and
no,
now he's
he that got shut down pretty quick. The um, DA's office dropped those charges, and like the same day, I think it was a pretty.
okay.
It's a bad situation. We'll put it that way.
Fingers crossed. Fingers
Yes.
crossed that holds because I think Rasheed Rice was the same thing, and
Well,
then
no,
we're like,
Rashid.
oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
And then he got into something worse.
Yes, he did. Regardless, you're right. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, part of that too for me is like you look at McCole Harbin's like stats from like his rookie year, like the year he really popped, and they really didn't use him deep. And I just don't know what like again his rookie year was his best year. He had 9 catches on 16 targets, 10 or more yards on the field. Uh,
That was with Tyreek, right?
I think so.
I believe because
2019 would have been the last.
that would have been their first Super Bowl year.
Maybe yeah, yeah. And so, but then between behind the line of scrimmage and 2 9 yards, he had 26 targets and 22 catches. And so, like, I think he is just more of that gadget guy that operates in that short to not but that short yardage area. And so I don't doubt that he can. He's still like he's 5'10". He's not the biggest guy, and so if he can still blow by guys and get open downfield where he doesn't have to really go for contested balls, then sure that could be an option for him. But I'd imagine he's going to be, like I said, more of the way the. You know what? Here's a great example, or a great point. They're going to use McCole Harbin the same way they used Christian Watson and the ways that we didn't want him to be used. Like we all wanted
Yes.
Christian Watson to be catching balls downfield and getting open using his speed that way, as opposed to Matt LaFleur using Christian Watson in the backfield on jet sweeps and things like that. I think that is the role he's filling for Christian Watson. He's not filling
Yeah.
the down the field threat, in my opinion. I could be wrong though, obviously just based on the stats that I'm
Very
looking at.
tight. You know what? Honestly, you know what this move reminded me of?
Go no.
Tyler Irving. Do you remember Tyler Irving?
I remember the name,
LaFleur's first year, he was like served a purpose, like, but a
kind of,
lot of like
yeah.
that gadget jet sweep kind of guy that he was a running back, but he played
Oh,
out
a little
wide.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I like I said, I remember the name more than I remember his play. But
I don't blame you.
but yeah, if you remember him, fair point. So anything else on McCole Hardman? I think this is just a pretty big wait and see moment for the Packers that way.
Yeah, it doesn't preclude them from taking a wide receiver, taking a shot that way, and
No,
you know,
nor should it.
it's yeah, nor should it. It's an interesting flyer. It's at least an admission that they wanted to bolster the wide receiver room and have a vet in there that wasn't just doing getting another rookie and then we're kind of like, all right, who are you paying? Because they already had too many wide receivers that they had to make that decision for.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Okay, let's move on to some other free agent news. The Packers lost a couple of special teamers. Uh, Eric Wilson signed back with the Vikings. Corey Ballantyne signed with the Colts, and Robert Rochelle signed with the Chiefs. So um, Eric Wilson had 559 snaps last year, and in addition to uh, having obviously cover in the linebacker room. And I guess the biggest question this leaves is what do the Packers do at linebacker to bolster that room? I think we already talked about this in the last pod, but I'd imagine what they're gonna do is just let Tyron Hopper kind of do his thing. They have four linebackers in that room right now, and so with Quay, Edge, Isaiah McDuffie, and Tyron Hopper, so they really only lost one in Eric Wilson. If they want to trot out four, they certainly could. That'd be a pretty shallow room, however. So with only 7 picks in the draft, which again we'll touch on this in a moment once we're done getting through free agency stuff and how they want to approach it. But I'd imagine there probably is a cheap linebacker deal coming down the line somewhere, just because
Y-
I
You have to imagine.
yeah I don't know if I want them to invest in it in the draft. Like I said, we'll talk about it, but um, that's what I think would prefer at this moment in time is just go find some cheap guy to be your fifth guy.
Eric Wilson, they did it with Devondre Campbell. Obviously, popped in a way that the Packers, I don't think, anticipated having to make him like their biggest free agent of the 22 offseason to like retain. They've done this plenty of times before too. So yeah, I think it's just more it makes more of a sense to go back into free agency and at worst have some cover as a linebacker, but just ultimately get someone that can help special teams.
Right, exactly. Corey Ballantyne played 75 defensive snaps last year and 203 on special teams. So losing him is pretty critical to the cornerback room. As it stands right now, the current corners under contract are Jaire Alexander, Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon, and Nate Hobbs. Uh, they also have Isaiah Dunn and Kamal Hayden, two guys that were practice squad fellows. So
Futures.
yeah, not great for depth for sure, at least right
No.
now. So, uh, and then losing Robert Rochelle, he had the one defensive snap this year and the 124 on special teams, including the fumble recovery on the punt return. I forget who that was against, but
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, he had that shortly after.
Dolphins,
I think that
I
yeah, yep,
believe.
yep, that's right. So that's where they sit for the rest of those free agency moves. Not too pressed about losing any of those guys. Eric Wilson a little bit, but not too much. Hopefully Tyron Hopper just makes a jump this year and he can fill out that role and kind of be set. But yeah, I'd imagine they'll address that somehow, considering Quay's uh, injury history as well. So
Yes.
uh, the latest on Jaire Alexander. This is from ESPN's Rob Dombrowski. Quote, while Jaire Alexander remains on the roster, the Packers are still trying to trade him, according to team sources and a source close to the player. They could wait indefinitely, but most likely would prefer to get something done before next month's draft. One source said the team has not approached Alexander about taking a pay cut, and that even if the team did, he would not be willing to do so. Without a trading partner, the Packers would likely release him, but there is no urgency to do so because he has no guaranteed money left on his deal until the start of the regular season when he's due $17.5 million. End quote. So we're just still in that waiting pattern on Jaire. I'll be curious to see how this ends. Like, we're getting to that time now between free agency kicking off and the draft to where teams that swung and missed on cornerback, hilariously, like the I shouldn't say like the Packers because they signed Nate Hobbs, but they still need another another back kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, even with Jaire. So we're that time now where it's like, hey, maybe a team wants to throw a sixth round pick at him or throw a seventh round pick at him, but who knows? I don't think it's still likely, but as I said in the last few pods now, maybe time heals all wounds here, and they come back in May and just say, let's try this again, see if we can take this season and see how you play, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even though it's unlikely and that you disagree with me, which is okay.
No, I at this point I'm kind of shocked that Jair is still on the team. And I understand from their point of view is like it's a position of need. I mean, look at corners. All you have to look at is the deal signed in free agency and the guaranteed money giving to all the various corners in the league, and it is a hot commodity. It's obvious you can never have enough cornerbacks. Packers are in a bind where it's not just that they have gotten to the point where they have to think about trading Jaire Alexander if things are totally bad, but as you mentioned, they have spent high draft picks on, or at least in one case, on a corner in recent memory, and he just signed with the Raiders because of how bad things were with his injuries, that being Eric Stokes. So I just think it's like the double whammy of like you already lost the corner, granted not a great one post injuries. Didn't really, have the time to find himself right right after his rookie year and then certainly post injury. And the whole thing with Jair has just been a mess. And I understand this need of like wanting to salvage things, but I just don't. I truly think at this point, and this could easily change if they somehow move on from him, or maybe everybody gets together and say kumbaya when Jair's doing yoga with goats or something, whatever he does. But I only think there is way more room for error and for discord for where the Packers are with Jair. Like it was a big thing that he went to OTAs and that there was talk like Adam Schefter talked about his roster bonus prior to last offseason or even during I'm forgetting what time frame, but this has just been a bubbling issue and it's not to the level of Aaron Rodgers who that's a separate conversation, but the Packers were so keen on like we don't want to be a team that is dominated by outside scrutiny or you know letting things fester where the personality conflicts or whatever the case may be is dominated in stories rather than their play on the field. And I feel like someone of Jair's standing who it's fluctuated, they've stripped him of his captaincy at times and but still you look at him as a prominent player in that locker room and if he's unhappy in any way like he's still getting his money he's still doing everything possible but it's still not in a things are there's at least a fracture there that they're entertaining moving on from him. Why on earth would you want this to continue into April, May, June when you are a team that wants to win a Super Bowl? Like I understand other teams deal with this on a greater degree than the Packers do, but like I just don't think they're at a point where they can try to mend things or patch things up, whatever it is. I mean, obviously things are just have gone quiet outside of Domowski's report and update that you don't know what their inclination is, but he's still on the team. You know what I mean? They haven't lowered his asking price to necessitate a move. So maybe it is around the draft and we'll see him be traded on day 2 or day 3, but I don't know. At this point, we'll see. But it I just feel like my ultimate I'm not going to budge from the fact that if this lingers on, if Jair Alexander is a member of the Packers at this time next month because it'll be after the draft. Um I think that only raises more questions than answers because yeah, like they're a better team if he's on the team. Like, or if they're a better team if he's a productive player and he's bought into his role. But it's like that fluctuates from game to month to season. You know this business more than anybody else. So why do you keep clinging to it, thinking it's going to get better when it has not?
I think
Sorry.
I think the main reason is that they are just so so trapped in the situation they're in. Like they only have four quarterbacks worthy of playing on the roster, and I want to I keep teasing talking about the draft because I want to talk about it as a whole thing versus going back and forth, but I'll support this argument in a second. But like if they come out of the draft and it just didn't turn out for them for corners, they might just need them, and they might just go bury the hatchet and say like it we're sorry for how it shook out. Like it's not how we wanted to play out either. And like I said, this just get through it. You know,
Yeah.
like I don't think it's beyond repair. And that's this again. It's all speculation. We're just a couple of
Yeah.
fans. But if it were beyond repair, Jordan, they would have cut him already.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think it is, and I think they probably just want to see
I
how it
just
shakes out because even headache aside, you still have to feel the team, and they can't trot out Keyshawn Nixon, Carrington Valentine, and Nate Hobbs as their starting corners. Like
no.
just don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Even if I've been inspired by Keyshawn, even if Carrington Valentine has shown good flashes, and we'll see if Nate Hobbs stays healthy enough to be a contributor. But if that's the case, like you're just really leaving Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, and Evan Williams out to dry. And so I think they're just probably waiting to see how the draft shakes out. If the draft shakes out how they want to, and they get their couple of corners that they want, probably sayonara. Well, so long, good luck. We don't need your
I'll be
services anymore.
designed.
Auf Wiedersehen. But I think they're just not in a position right now to cut them. I think that's as
I
simple as it
agree.
is.
I agree. I just think my whole thing is that they have whether how much of the details came from Jaire, came from someone within the Packers. So much is out of there that whether regardless of what source it came from, it's like you have painted this picture of it being feeling like it's a like at it like Rebecca. Oh God, I tried to say a smart word and I sounded like an idiot. Uh, you like it's not. It's at a. Good Lord, I'm struggling,
But just say it's not
struggling.
saying it's beyond repair. You can just say that.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, like I just don't. That is where I'm clinging to the fact that well, it sounded like you had a plan to move on from him, and you didn't like what you saw.
Right.
Or you that like and we knew at the time like that reeked of desperation.
Oh, for
Reeked of
sure. Yeah.
desperation. That is not a Packers thing to just kind of like air out all the dirty laundry of like breaking down. This is when he got hurt. This is when we thought he was going to come back. He
Yeah.
didn't respond the right way. And it all seems silly for an injury that he ultimately suffered and his body didn't respond right to. But, you know, we shouldn't have known all that stuff.
Right.
Why did that come out?
Yeah.
I don't know. But when it comes to that end, it's like, of course you're gonna run wild with they're gonna move on from him. There's no there's no other reason to think that is the case. And now, we're roughly
Oh, hold on, folks. Looks like Jordan might have froze. I don't know what happened to his to his camera or his feed, but we'll take a quick pause, possibly a little ad break, and then we'll catch back up in a minute. So enjoy the ads for for 2 seconds. Jordan, welcome back.
hey.
What a great time for an automatic computer restart. So,
uh,
do you have anything else on Jair? I think we did a good enough
no,
15 minutes on him,
yeah, I just feel like we'll probably
so
talk in circles as we already
as we
have
already have.
because
So
it continues.
I know. So let's talk about our approach to the draft, and I think like that's a good catalyst to sort of talk about these decisions that they've already made and decisions that they haven't made regarding again Jair and stuff like that. And so I want to give some context for those of you that don't know just like what the draft looks like this year. This is from NFL.com. something I relatively agree with. From Lance Zerline, he's their draft analyst over at NFL.com. He ranked the positions by strength, and he has like a little scale that he does.
Oh yes, I love this.
Yep. So he has a ranking scale range from 10 to 30. A score of 20 points or higher is generally a strong position group. And obviously, these types of things vary from year to year, right? You have years like last year where quarterback is a really strong quarterback draft. I think six taken in the top 12, if I'm not mistaken, or five taken in the top 12. It was
It was
Daniels,
six.
yeah, Daniels, Williams, May, McCarthy, Penix, the
Knicks.
and Nix. So yeah, six in the top 15, I think is what the stat is. But then this year you have guys like Cam Ward and Shador Sanders are kind of the only first round mocked guys, and they people don't like them. I think it was Jordan. What's the fella's name from ESPN? I think its name is Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed
Yes.
is ESPN's draft guy, and on the Athletic Football Show this week he had mentioned that Cam Ward would have been his like fourth prospect in the draft last year, behind the three
Mm,
um, that were taken in order. And
the
so
Fab Four.
yeah, obviously like this is pretty simple to explain to everybody, but these things vary right year to year. So Lance Zierlein had his rankings as such: edge defender, running back, interior defensive line were the only three above his mark of a strong group, which was 20, with 26 and a half, 24, and 22 points respectively. And then the rest of the way down was tight end, offensive tackle, wide receiver, cornerback, interior offensive lineman, and then linebacker, quarterback, and safety to round out the strength of the position groups this year. And so as we think about how we want for the Packers to approach the draft, I've been doing mock draft Monday in the Discord. If you aren't in the Discord, go to our Substack, which is gspn.info. In the About section, there's a link to the Discord. While you're there, feel free to subscribe and listen to all the GSPN After Darks, get our pods ad free, all the good stuff, right? And so, but in my mock drafts, I've been kind of figuring out what the draft looks like for the Packers at 23 for their second round pick, for their third round pick, and so on. And just kind of like looking at the stats of the players who have been there. I haven't gotten to tape yet. We'll start breaking down players we like in next week's episode, starting with the offensive guys. And so I think what I really wanted them to do in this draft is is to treat it how they treated safety last year. I want them to throw their seven picks at the positions of need, with the understanding that they're going to draft a lineman somewhere. They always do, right? And so if we talk about like as we've talked about in the offseason so far, their positions of need are wide receiver, cornerback, uh, interior defensive lineman, and edge rusher are their
Yeah.
four biggest ones. And so where they go in that order, it is kind of depends on draft strategy, right? And like if you have a bunch of really good interior defensive linemen throughout the draft, it being one of the higher um, groups according to Lance, and I would agree with that. You could maybe pass on an interior defensive lineman and get one in the second or third round that you're happy with developing over the next couple of years, kind of thing. As opposed to like wide receiver, maybe you don't feel comfortable waiting to the fourth or fifth round to take. I think his name is Jaden Royals, or I forget his first name, but his last name is Royals. He's from Utah State. He's consistently there in sort of the fifth round area for for teams, and so it just depends on. It's actually going to bother me now that I don't know his name, so I'm going to just take 2 seconds to find it because now I feel bad. Not Jalen Royals. I was close. Regardless, it's like maybe you want to go and grab Emeka uh, Egbuka from, I think I probably butchered his last name. My apologies, but from Ohio State. Or if you saw on Twitter and social media this week, I think it might have been last week, Brian Gutekunst was the only NFL GM at Tep McMillan's pro day in Arizona. And so you can either read that as Brian Gutekunst doing his due diligence on a guy that's probably not going to be there at 23 when he picks, or maybe the Packers want to trade up to get Tep McMillan in the first 15 or so picks they feel that they can do that. So they take one of the best receivers in the draft, so they don't have to take one later in the draft that might not work out because it's just not as a talented of a receiver as the receiver group as it has been in years past. So
Yeah.
I guess my thought process and my first ideology on this is that I really would like for them to throw like 2 picks at receiver, 2 picks um at edge rusher, and 2 picks at corner. And that leaves 1 pick for either an interior or an edge rusher or an offensive lineman as they pick like right now. And so I'd be okay if they like swapped edge and D line and just kind of took 3 picks and put two in one spot, one or vice versa kind of thing. But I'm not really interested in them taking players that already have like that for rooms that already exist, right? Like linebacker is one that they kind of need. And to what I mentioned earlier is I think I would just rather them go sign a veteran to fill that gap for now, and then maybe next year go get a different linebacker in the draft because they spent
Yeah.
2 linebackers and they spent 2 picks on linebacker last year,
Yep.
and so that's kind of where I'm sitting. Like BPA is typically I don't want to say how most NFL teams draft it or the smart way to draft, but there's also just positions that are worth more than other positions. Like the NFL values uh, edge rushers more than they do safeties. They value quarterbacks more than they do running backs. And so you're going to take those positions that are of higher importance higher in the draft because the caliber of player at the position of importance is a critical part of building your team. But I don't want them to get bogged down in like filling the linebacker room because of Eric Wilson's departure or God forbid they draft a safety for some reason where they don't need a safety. Like I just
Yeah.
think there's the team's needs are too obvious for them to screw around and go add 2 more linemen to the room kind of thing is where I've kind of settled at least for right now.
Honestly, if you really think about it, I think the Packers' best work in roster building under Goody has been their draft picks mirror the positions that they have turned to in the free agency. You know what I mean? Like
Kinda, yeah.
the big splash of 2019 of going after Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith in the edge room. Who did he pick in the draft with the first in the first round? Rashawn Gary. You know, like, and obviously you could argue whether that's ultimately been a sound move. I think that's been more of a criticism of Gary post extension. But I think even last year is like, yeah, you make the move for Xavier McKinney, but you obviously needed a lot more help in the safety room. So you take 3 picks of safeties between Evan Williams, um,
Javon
Bullard,
Bullard.
and Katan or Keaton Oladapo. Um, yeah, I just think it just more of like mirroring the positions that you've already addressed. I mean, the thing about you're always going to need offensive linemen. They're always going to be proactive in not letting that problem fester like some other teams have done and will pay for based on their moves this offseason. Cornerback, I mean, you just need more darts to throw. Really, that's take on more flyers.
Right.
Wide receivers, kind of the same thing. It's like all these, we know the positions that they need to address. We know the roster needs on this team. They just need more of them. They just need more flyers, and it's you're not going to say even like it's very like I'm going on a tangent on my tangent. But something that we'll definitely explore is that you look at Goody's been there for a while. You see like these draft classes, and a lot of them, especially recently, have not aged out well. Like there are some that are like some picks that look good, and some picks look bad. That is kind of the average median
And
of any GM.
right, but to your point, I think it's weirder that I he's had a couple of hits like the rookie year Jaire and rookie contract Rashawn Gary were really good, and but it's been a lot of like pretty much mid to bad. And I have a Substack article talking about this soon. We'll dive into it more, but yeah, it hasn't been the strongest draft resume for Goody. Excuse me, for Goody.
Well, I think again, it's like it's tough because I think it has fluctuated from year to year. Like the 2023 draft class, you got a lot of help from players that helped the Packers get over the line, helped them beat the Cowboys not last year but the year before,
Right.
win the first playoff game as a 7 seed, yada yada yada. But a class like last year where your first round pick didn't do any impact at all.
Right. It gave no impact.
Marshawn Marshawn Lloyd, a third round pick, was pretty much out the entire year, outside
Yep.
of a game or two, if not more. Um, who else am I forgetting that was?
Early. Tyron Hopper was a third round pick. He didn't play.
Yeah, and yet
Jacob Monk didn't really play. Neither did
you look
Travis
at
Glover. Keaton O'Doppel didn't really play. Those are fifth, sixth, three, 2/5 and a 6th round pick, but you don't expect them to play, but still.
but you look at Cooper and I mean I'm probably more down on Bowler than by
Me and most
comparison,
other people are, yeah.
but Edgerrin Cooper alone is like, oh, like that
That's the
is
hit,
already a good start. Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's a hit that's a hit on the level of Jaire, of Rashawn Gary rookie contract.
Yep.
So it's like everything varies, and the whole point is to kind of meet in the middle where all those come at the same time. I think a lot of the things that we're approaching with the Packers now is that they have committed second contracts, big money extensions to the guys like Jaire, to Rashawn Gary. We're going to throw Jordan Love in that mix, and as time develops,
Yep.
and you want to see progression continue, and it
Mm-hmm.
hasn't in two cases, and it's led to those rooms in particular where you need difference makers
Yep.
not producing a difference maker.
Exactly.
So, and Mina Kimes, her most recent podcast, she did kind of something similar of looking at like each team in the league and breaking down something. And the last thing that they cover is the Packers, and I thought it was really interesting. And just like it's a good team that can be great, is banking on internal development, but you look at what has happened in their division and how things can kind of fluctuate based on hope versus reality. And it's like, it's just this is why it's so hard to build a team from year to year and why priorities change on a fly because what you thought was settled going into last year is far from settled. You know what I mean? Like, and I think, as she mentioned, the biggest problem facing the Packers is that they need difference makers from positions that require a lot of money if you're playing the free agency game. Like
Yep.
wide receiver, as much as we will lament, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you go after DK Metcalf? Well, he got a big extension. I would have paid that easily if I'm the Green Bay Packers, but I
Yep.
understand why you kind of buck at
Why you
that
don't?
price.
Why you don't? Right? Why you don't give up the 2nd round pick and why you don't pay him that
Yeah.
$150 million contract?
But players less proven than DK Metcalf got sizable deals even in a rising NFL salary cap age.
Right.
And you're like, that guy got that? And you
Yep.
don't even know. Like, that's where the math is changing so rapidly. And I think we could easily mistake the Packers' patience as kind of being inert or, you know, uh, just kind of stuck in their ways.
Sitting on
And
their
I,
hands.
yeah, sitting on their hands. And at the same time, if they had done all these things and things blew up in their face, I think we knew that would be a reckoning that they couldn't just overcome.
Right. I think that's a great point that you talked about. Well, that Mina made on her pod is that yeah, the Packers' positions of need are arguably some of the most expensive in the game. Like
Yep.
it's quarterback, wide receiver, corner, and edge rusher. Those are some pretty high impact players. Where if you're the
And even
best,
They shelled out a 4-year, $77 million deal
to Nate Hobbs. Yep. And
to
it's
a good guard, but like not like
oh to Aaron Banks. My apologies. Yes. Yep.
that's okay,
Yep.
but not like no one anticipated that happening.
Right. And so that again that makes it difficult. It's tough. And so that's where I kind of question sometimes the Packers draft profiles and how they sort of really rely on guys' athletic ability to be able to move around and play a bunch of different areas. And so, yeah, I really just don't want them messing around in in other positions
Yeah,
because they have deep needs at the three biggest ones
look at
that we talked about.
the Eagles. I know this is kind of we're I was last year I was looking at the 49ers and be like, well, what do they have that the Packers don't? And I kept coming back to
Really good
Fred Warner,
players is
really good players, and
yeah,
that has changed
right.
uh, in a year. But Fred Warner was kind of the sole guy that was like, you. This is like an irreplaceable like
Are you talking? You
presence.
said let's look at the Eagles. You said now we're going to Fred Warner. Did you mean the Niners
So that's the Niners were like the team last year that I was like, what do
coming into
they have that the
2024?
Packers? Yeah,
Yeah,
and now the Eagles have won the Super Bowl, and you're like, what do they have that the Packers don't? And it's like, I know some of their their defensive presence has taken a hit with
right,
some of the guys that they lost. Yet they drafted, they signed players, they went into free agency. Like they had so many guys that whether they were like a Milton Williams type that got big money by essentially being like a rotational player for them, they kept going to that well. They dipped in that well that they had guys 1 through 8 or whatever it is that they could constantly create pressure and terrorize opposing quarterbacks like Jordan Love in the playoff game last year to the point where their roster depth on as like with their defensive line specifically was so gargantuan that it just won that Super Bowl overwhelmingly. So with a team like the Packers that has done plenty drafting and has extended Kenny Clark, has extended Rashawn Gary. It's like you don't want them to go like I think it would be a bad admission of the Packers to take an edge rusher in the first round because you did that 2 years ago with Lucas Van Ness and he hasn't really found his footing. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I just want a good player. You just want a good player. You can't by you can't be defined by past mistakes and have people expect that's what's going to happen again. And picks can admit some kind of failure, but if you're ultimately getting a better player, then so be it. Like that's the ultimate kind of you know erasing a mistake, a whiteout moment that they could do.
hmm and I think to your point about the Eagles too, like everyone talked about the Eagles because they just won the Super Bowl, and like the best thing about the Eagles is they just had good players. That's what it comes
Yeah.
down to, and what benefits them, weirdly enough, is that the year they drafted Jalen Hurts, the year before that they were really bad.
Yes.
They were really bad. They traded back from the sixth pick in the draft to the Dolphins to take somebody I forget who, but then they trade back to 12 and then trade up with the Cowboys to get Devonta Smith, but they got a 2022 first round pick from the Dolphins to get uh, so the Dolphins go up to 6, and I think they traded that pick too, or they traded it.
Is that the Jalen Carter draft?
Nope, that's the next one. So I think they traded back from whatever the Dolphins pick was in
Yeah.
whatever draft 22 draft. I think that's how this works. I don't know the order exactly. But then they
Yeah.
get Jordan Davis in the first round in that draft.
Yes.
And then the next year they have two first round picks and draft Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith. Like the
Yep.
Eagles have just done a phenomenal job in getting great players and hitting on picks. The Packers have had good chances to to pick as many times as the Eagles have, right? They had two first round picks in 2021. They moved up to get Lucas Van Ness in 2023. And so the difference is the Packers haven't hit on them. And I think that's the issue and the overarching idea of like why I think Goody's a good GM but not like a great GM is that for whatever reason they just haven't identified super awesome talent. Like for sure like surefire hits. And I think that like and I shouldn't say as like they haven't found them kind of thing because like again we talked about rookie year Jaire or rookie contract Jaire, we talked about rookie contract uh Rashawn Gary. But to me it's like you look at the kind of guys uh that he's drafting and they're really good really good players. I'm talking about Howie Roseman uh
Yeah.
that they're drafting. Like it's not too often that you just find these guys and they're like, geez Louise, like what how did they get that guy? How did they get that guy? Kind of thing. Like going back through their again, these are all rookie year deals, and that's the sort of the same way we've been grading Goody. We'll see how the rest of their careers go out. But like 2024 draft has Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, two awesome players right at the top of their draft. Will Shipley had a good year for them last year, as much as or, no, never mind, not Will Shipley. I don't know why I mentioned him, but um, like there's other players like Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, two great guys on their team. Um, Jordan Davis, Cam Jurgens, two really good players. Devonta Smith, Landon Dickerson, Milton Williams, Kenneth Gainwell. Like these are just really good
You're naming,
players.
yeah, that's all Super Bowl winning
Right.
players
And so
that are
like
making sizable
right.
contributions to that.
And that's again, honestly, that's just since 2021. Howie
Yeah.
Roseman's draft resume before that, if you almost certain he's been the gym
He's
there
been there for
for
a
a
very long
while.
time.
But before that, his first round pick in 2020 was Jalen Rager. Jalen Hurts was a second round pick. Um, Quez Watkins that hasn't done much of anything. He was a sixth round pick for him. His first round pick in 2019 was Andre Dillard. Sound familiar?
Hmm.
Like they drafted Miles Sanders too. Like Dallas Goedert was a second round pick in 2018. Like they kind of just like weren't really doing that well for a while there. And so like he's found a scout team that is really good at identifying talent. And I think that's what the Packers need. And I don't know how they do that, but we know they really value being athletic and things like that. It's just like I want them just to find the good players, and I know that's easier said than done. And we've kind of gotten a bit away from how the Packers should approach the draft versus just generally just the draft in general and our frustrations around it and how this team has been built. But it's to my point that I think with their quote unquote limited amount of picks this year because they had 11 last year and so they were able to go throw picks at safety. They were able to go throw picks at the line. This year they only have 7 and 4 holes to fill. Like corner,
Yeah.
edge, receiver and I'm gonna forget the other one. We'll say
Corner
linebacker.
edge receiver. You could
Interior
say interior.
interior offensive line. Oh, interior defensive line. Like defensive line, edge, cornerback, and receiver. And
Yeah.
so if they had 8, I'd say go throw 2 at each. Just go throw picks at them, kind of thing. But they have to be smart about doing it. I think that's where push comes to shove here. Is where do we value? I guess just as a position, I'll ask you. We'll get into the actual players in the next couple of weeks. I guess Jordan, for your first round pick, say the guy hits. That will just say the guy hits. Say it's Emeka Ugba or Igbuka. My apologies. Say they somehow get Ted McMillan. Say they get like one of these top receivers, or it's Derek Harmon, or any of these guys that are really valued. Which position would you like them to take in the first round, solely based on how the team looks right now?
Edge.
Edge, like cut and dry. That's where you want to go.
I think that is it's the biggest room to improve that if I'm being honest, I don't think they don't have anybody that I feel like can move the needle to feeling like this is settled. This is it. And part of that is you need more you're going to need more shots.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, um, but yeah, I just think your number one edge rusher, Rashawn Gary, is fine, but it comes with a weight of expectations that he obviously has not fully achieved or hit yet. And ultimately, it's like after that, who if after Rashawn Gary, you know who is probably the edge rusher that I'm most bullish on?
Brenton Cox Jr., baby.
Yeah,
That's right.
which that's a free
My
hit when you're
my
talking about an
second king.
got a lot of kings here. I would just say you got a lot of kings.
I'm
Don't
a
act so
I'm
surprised.
aghast. I want I would like some credit, sir.
I
Post
understand. I'm
post
not
2020
discrediting you.
post 2023 draft when in training camp when Emmanuel Wilson and Brenton Cox Jr. were tearing apart preseason fourth quarters like nobody's business. I was there.
I'm
I was
not
there. Now look where we are.
LCD sound systems reference going on right now. I am not discrediting what you threw out there. I'm just saying, Mike. Why am I already forgetting his
Abernathy.
name?
You leave
There
his
you
name
go.
out of your fucking mouth.
Keep Mike Abernathy's name out your. Um, where was I? Yeah, but Brenton Cox Jr. I'm more
Right.
bullish on him than Kingsley Enagbare, JJ Enagbare, sorry, Luke Van Ness, who, as we talked
God,
about, they
he needs
just
the help. He
he needs the
needs to take
help.
a
I
jump.
don't. Brian Gutekunst, random, just like I'm really expecting big things from him.
Yeah.
When he did his end of season presser, it's like, who asked you?
Yeah, who
What?
asked? Yeah.
It was not provoked. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, I just think as much as I always look at wide receiver as like you just need a number one, it's like in terms of this defense, which is really close to being like recognized as a fully fledged, like all three levels as a unit.
Mm-hmm.
They need someone that can get home, that gets sacks, that
Yep.
at least just ratchets up the pressure that we didn't frankly see a lot of last year.
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah.
about you?
I I really struggle because I truly believe, and I'm saying this as somebody that is going to do his best to not be this person, but this is a no-win situation for Brian Gutekunst this draft. From
I agree.
reaction from media, from fans, from us specifically, like you have two options. You have two options. You draft a receiver in the first round, first time since 2000
Javon
and
Walker.
2001 Javon Walker, 2000 Javon Walker, I think, and invest there, hopefully finding your wide receiver one along the way somewhere. You'll have people, fans, media, again, us saying you needed to draft like the defense more. The defense, as you put it, is closer to being a fleshed out pin your ears back defense that can be really talented, and they're just those two spots away, right? And so if you invest in receiver finally after 25 years of drafts, you're it. Most people will say hip hip hooray because it'll finally happen, but it's hilariously, weirdly
What took
enough,
you so long?
what took you so long? It's
Yep.
hilariously, weirdly enough, to where they just need an edge rusher and they need a corner. But then the other side of the coin, the tough part about this is that if they go and draft edge rusher, they go and draft corner, they go and draft interior defensive linemen, you'll have the same people, us included, trying to like criticize that the picks you've already made there were bad. Devontae Wyatt, Rashawn Gary to now his second contract extent. Um, Jaire again, like we're picking on Jaire for second contract stuff, but it's just like you wish you'd see more long term production out of these guys, and it's just like, ugh, like it's just tough. I know I'm going to have a reaction either way, and I'm not proud of it already, but it's just like in the moment we live in, talking about the ideas that this team is going through, kind of thing. It's just they need to nail all these picks to stay competitive with over the next couple years, and I'm just not confident they do so. And I think that's where my sort of energy and passion comes from on this, because if they go draft Derek Harmon, like guy that most of Packers Discord or Packers Twitter and our Discord like, and myself included, if they go draft Derek Harmon, that's well and good. He still needs to develop and be productive.
Yep.
And it's like, ugh, because like I like Devontae Wyatt, and they fire their D line coach, and they hopefully get a new guy in there that can raise the tide of all these guys, right? But we just don't know. And after the draft, we still have 5 months till football, and we won't know
Yep.
until then, which is the most frustrating part, Jordan. So, anything else? I know we should wrap up pretty quick here.
No, I think that sums up the frustrations that things will be admitted because, as you mentioned, like all of these, they took a lot of wide receivers recently in drafts, not at first round positions, but high draft picks.
Right.
And
I mean, Watson, Reed,
Watson,
Dobbs, and Wicks are
four, five,
A two for Watson, a two for Reed, a four for Dobbs, and a fifth for Wicks, right?
yeah, yeah,
So, and you can't say the 2 seconds have worked out so far. Like, I think it's fair to say neither of them have worked out so far.
one more than the other, but
Right. Watson more than
it's
Reed, but we've had one really good year of
talking about
Reed
one
and
that's
one really,
healthy and one that's not.
yeah,
So yeah, it's this is where the opting out of if they just go to offensive line or something like I don't know. Well, frustration is certainly going to come
right. And to
over the next few weeks.
to wrap up my entire point before we wrap up the pod, to get back to Jaire, if the draft doesn't shake out to where they find a corner that they like and they draft one, like say Ben Morrison from Notre Dame is like a guy they want, right? But they don't want to take
Yeah,
him in the first. Doesn't fall to him in the second. It's like, ugh, okay. Well, we'll try and get the next guy. And then they try and get like Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, a guy that I liked during the season. Or like they wanted to get Jade Barron from Texas. And like these guys just aren't falling to them, right? Like the draft just isn't shaking out their way. And they end up with like Isaiah Thomas from Florida State in like the third or fourth round, and then Colby Bryant from Kansas in like the fifth or sixth round. Like, do you really want to roll with those guys going into your season? Maybe not, and so maybe that's why they keep Jaire. But
yeah,
say Jade Barron falls to them in the first round, and they really like him. Maybe they draft Jade Barron and say, "Thanks, Jaire. Don't need you. So long. Bye." Like that's where I see this. That's why I think that depending on how the draft shakes out will inform the rest of how they treat the Jaire situation. And if they get a corner day one or early day two, maybe they say, hey, we'll take your sixth or seventh round pick for Jaire. Thanks, whoever team, whatever.
yeah.
So,
It's very possible.
yep. So, all right, that was enough rambling about the draft. I'm now officially excited to look into these guys. Next
Yes.
week, we'll be doing all of our offensive targets, sort of guys in the first few rounds that we might want them to take, sort of area. And then the week after that will be defense, and then the week before the draft we'll have the Talk of the Tundra official mock draft. So to catch all those things, make sure you're subscribed to the pod here wherever you listen to wherever you listen to podcasts. Go check out the Substack gspn.substack.com to get all of our primo content and all these ads or all these pods ad free, and the GSPN After Dark, which are a lot of fun. Check out Eurostep 1-6 for all things Bucks, cruising for a bruising as the Brewers kick off their season today, with Adam and Andrew doing all those recaps and all the fun Brewers news. And then make time for this for the Junk Drawer movie pods and this, that, and the other. That was the fastest intro this side of Mississippi I've ever done, folks. Thank you so much for listening. And Jordan, thank you.
Thank you.